Pickaxe.
Hello and welcome back to the Review of Death, a Doctor Who podcast, your fortnightly home for Doctor Who news and reviews. I'm Matthew Toffolo. I'm joined as ever by Billy Garrett John, but today we have a very special guest.
We do. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome to the Review of Death, a Doctor Who podcast, Mr. Al Dewar. How are you doing, sir? You all right?
I am. I'm doing very well. I've just returned from 2 weeks on holiday, so I'm doing more than well, to be honest, at the moment. I'm easing myself back in gently.
Yeah, good to hear. You loom large in your own legend, Al, as the head of the Doctor Who action figure range, or whatever it is. Can you just briefly tell us what your job title is and sort of what it is you do?
So I'm creative director. I'm not the boss, contrary to what people seem to think. I do handle the Doctor Who section, but my job is basically to have creative oversight of everything that we create in-house. And I'll be honest, that mostly includes not Doctor Who stuff, because Doctor Who is just a small part of a very big number of licenses. So on anything from product, packaging, anything where an opinion has to be had on how it should look, how it should work, whether it's the right cost, etc. Although I tend not to, my colleagues will say, you tend not to pay attention to things like the cost. So yeah, and I'm more the creative side. So I literally have creative input on most stuff. So that's my job really, and I love it. It's great. It's good.
So you said Doctor Who is only a small cog. What do you think is the brand that you work on the most?
Oh, well, it varies year to year. I mean, I've worked on a whole bunch of stuff. It can be, preschool stuff's quite big. We're just launching a new girls product called Mouse in the House, which is about to come out. Well, in fact, it's out now, and it's doing very well, which has these little tiny little mice. This is a little freebie sample that will be given away, but the little play against the wall play sets. Probably our biggest brand, not probably, the biggest brand at the moment is probably the Gujitsu stuff and the stretch stuff that we do. That's not my one, but it's a huge part of the business at the moment, and it's doing extremely well. But I mean, I think people have this idea that I spend my entire day sitting by my desk or at my desk working on Doctor Who. It is not the case.
So how did you get into the toy business, Al? What was your path into it?
Circuitously, if that's the right word. So I studied graphic design originally, way up in Aberdeen in the Arctic Circle or near it. So graphics was really where I sort of started. But when I was a kid, I was always building stuff. I mean, I completely did the wrong thing. I should probably have done product design because that's what I ended up doing anyway. But so I did graphics at college, and then I was working at a graphics company in Weybridge, and I think that, they came to the conclusion at the same time as I did that it wasn't for me, and I wasn't really enjoying it. And I just happened to have applied for a job with Hasbro. It was a job I didn't have a hope in hell of getting, if I'm honest. I was woefully underqualified at that stage in my career, but they they kind of knew that some young dumb kid would apply for the job. So I actually ended up joining Hasbro, and I worked in the games department and then in the boys area for a while eventually. Then I left Hasbro. Then I basically went into, what did I do after that? I worked for a company up in Oxford for a while, and then I got back into toys essentially and kind of found my feet. And that was around about 2001. I joined Character, and then from there I just kind of enjoyed, basically, I'd been doing toy design and designing products. So I'd been designing products since my Hasbro days essentially. So I had a good knowledge of stuff. But I do everything. I do plush toys, I do plastics, I do ceramics. I've done electronics. So yeah, we've done a ton of different stuff, and you have to. I mean, you're never working on one thing for very long before it changes.
So how about the Doctor Who license. How did that all come about back in the early 2000s?
Oh, well, that was actually an interesting story because there was a ton of companies pitching for the license when it relaunched back in 2005, and they came to our offices here and they were chatting, and we'd done the usual spiel. We'd sort of told them how wonderful we were and what we were experienced at and how we could do stuff much faster than anyone else, which was pretty much true. But then they said, of course, if you were to get this gig, somebody in your department at least has to be a Doctor Who fan. And I sort of went, I've got a TARDIS in my garden. Does that count? And they kind of looked at, you could tell they sort of looked at each other and kind of went, this is interesting. So, yeah, I like to think the fact that I had a police box in my back garden was at least partly responsible for us getting the Doctor Who license. So that was really how that came about. But I mean, behind the scenes, it's the same. It's always down to contracts and money and fun things like that.
Now this TARDIS, I got a funny feeling is this a Paul McGann TV movie, TARDIS?
Oh,
it was. I absolutely love the TV movie. I especially love that TARDIS. I built a lot of computer models of that console room in my time. And the sad thing is I've lost all those now. I'd love to have them again because I could 3D print them all, which would be great. But yeah, it was a Paul McGann, which had the much bigger sign boxes at the top, and it looked sort of tall and quite purposeful. Although I have to be honest, now in hindsight, my TARDIS choices have changed a little bit. I'm a big fan of the original Mackenzie Trench Mark II. Which I think the original police box, which I think is just beautiful. And it's slightly ironic to me that given that that's what a certain corporation went to court with the Metropolitan Police over, they've never actually used one. It's always been a derivative sort of stylized version, but there you go. But yeah, that was it. Yeah.
I think that's something we've always mentioned, isn't it? How much we would like to see a proper police box used in the TV series.
And I feel like there were photos of around Series 5, there were production sketches of a Mackenzie Trench style box for Matt Smith.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I remember having a conversation with somebody at the BBC at the time, and I sort of said, and I had two models of a Mackenzie Trench TARDIS to the scale of our figures, and I sort of said, it's a lovely police box. You should really have this. So they said, oh, could you send it to us? And I went, yeah, of course. So I sent it down, and then I did see some drawings. I think it was Matt Smith. Some images or blueprints of Matt Smith standing next to a proper full-sized police box, which is probably the ones you're talking about. I never got my TARDIS back. So somebody is in possession of one of only two really nice models of the Mackenzie Trench TARDIS, though I do have the 3D SDL files, Matt. So if you ever want one, just let me know.
There we are, coming to a YouTube channel near you, review of that.
I mean, Al, you've outed yourself as a fan, obviously, not just in front of the BBC, but here on the podcast as well. What is your personal history with Doctor Who? How did you kind of fall in love with it?
I mean, it's interesting. So I have two older brothers and a younger sister, and my eldest brother and I absolutely love sci-fi, and especially Doctor Who, and my other brother and my sister just completely don't get it. So it was quite interesting. So we always used to sort of chat. He very distinctly remembers the black and white, even William Hartnell time of Doctor Who. I don't. My earliest memories of Doctor Who were Jon Pertwee, 100%. Which is why I think his tenure is really cool. That moment when Tom Baker sort of sat up on TV, having just regenerated from Jon Pertwee, is just etched into my mind. I know exactly where I was. I know exactly where I was sitting on the living room floor watching Robot and having this really wacky guy. And I remember my mum going, I'm not sure I like him. He's a bit strange. And I sort of went, hey, he's blooming fantastic. This guy's just, it's just completely bonkers. And so, yeah, so my personal history with Doctor Who is remembering Jon Pertwee, but Tom Baker has always, I'm probably not supposed to say that. But personally, my doctor was Tom Baker, 100%. So yes, it's literally etched into my psyche. That theme tune, the time tunnel, everything.
You've got a Tom Baker fan here. You're a Pertwee fan.
I'm a Pertwee fan.
So come on, yeah,
we're in good company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Jon Pertwee stuff as well. It's amazing how, whether it's the music or the way it's shot, a lot of it makes you feel very uneasy. It's got a real ability to kind of put you on edge in a way that maybe, and I think it was that era, but a lot of modern programming doesn't quite. But it had a way of just being a little bit strange. And I remember as a kid being really freaked out by, some of those stories. They were just, there was a hell of a lot of filler and padding in them, if we're being honest, with all the other stuff. But my God, they left that, they just had that way of just creeping you out slightly.
So what did you think when you heard that Doctor Who was coming back? I mean, did you stick with Doctor Who all the way until 89, or had you sort of dropped off?
I did. Well, as I say, the Paul McGann one, I went to HMV and queued up at midnight to get my DVD. To get my DVD, I don't think so. To get my videotape of the episode. Despite the fact, I think you guys might be able to correct me on this, but I think despite the fact that they'd either shown it or were going to show it the following Saturday.
Yeah, they hadn't shown it yet. Yeah, it came out on video first.
So I queued up. We then drove back to the Hasbro offices at Stockley Park in London, from central London, and we went straight into the presentation theatre that was used for doing presentations to like 30, 40 people, and stuck the video up on the big screen and sat there and watched the TV movie as it was just known then. I watched it right through to the end. I remember being really disappointed when Sylvester's era got cancelled, because I'd gone to, I think that was my final year in college, and I'd come back. I remember coming back and catching most of that final season, and it was just a step change in terms of some of it was still very as it was, but there was the way it was shot, the imagery, just the sort of level of the way they did stuff, the seriousness with which the subject matter was treated, which in some ways is a bit of a counterpoint to the fact that all those stories, if anything, suffer from the fact that they're too short. They've almost been cut back too far to really kind of, make them sort of proper length stories. But it was such a fantastic season. And the fact that, that last shot of them walking off towards the TARDIS, Ace and the Doctor, and then that was it. And it was like, God, Doctor Who's gone. And then and it wasn't like you knew it was coming back. It was just gone. It was just, you're too young to remember.
Yeah.
Don't nod your heads. Don't nod your heads as if you know what I'm talking about.
Well, we've heard it all through my brother.
Yeah,
he was
we've lived
there,
vicariously through the pain.
Yeah. I mean, I can just about remember the TV movie coming out. So that's my earliest Doctor Who memories. So what about when it came back, or when you heard it was going to be coming back?
Well, as usual, I committed a huge faux pas. Because I was in at the BBC chatting to somebody about something completely unconnected with Doctor Who. I made some, despite the fact I enjoyed it, I made some flippant comment about, I wish they'd do Doctor Who properly instead of Scream of the Shalka was out. I sort of said, I wish they'd do proper Doctor Who instead of, and I got kind of, not berated, but I got something like, well, it is proper Doctor Who. But then in the sort of same breath, it was mentioned that you know, when people say to you, watch that space, it was kind of the whatever equivalent was back then. They sort of said, you know, there's something in the works. And then I think it was probably about 6 months, and then it was all announced. And then, of course, that's when the discussions with the BBC came up. My boss is a huge fan of Doctor Who as well. Not quite, in fairness, to the same level as me, but you know, I think without his keenness, we wouldn't necessarily have got the license. But it's luck of the draw at the end of the day. I mean, they could have picked. I think at that time there was probably 3 or 4 British toy companies that could have or potentially would have got the gig. So I think we were just lucky that when we got it. The biggest issue for us was just timing, because as usual with these things, by the time you find out and it's all agreed, you're already very short of time to get stuff out for when we wanted it to be out, which was, I think, just after transmission, or at least to try and catch Christmas of that first year. So yeah, I mean, from a personal point of view, I was just fabulous and scared and worried, because you kind of weren't sure what it was going to be and how they were going to do it. And I remember we were invited to a private screening at BBC Worldwide, I think, as it would have been then, of Rose, and just thinking, God, what's this? You know, what's it going to be like? And just being absolutely blown away. It was so different and so samey at the same time, which was really cool. It was brilliant. You know, you could tell people cared about it, and they put a lot of time and effort into it.
I'm assuming you've seen certain images. I guess the BBC had provided you stuff like of the Tardis and Daleks by that point.
I think this is what I mean when I say we were late. I mean, I think they were so close to it being on TV, and I think the fastest we could get stuff out was about 5 months, which could just about get stuff out in time for Christmas. We'd seen some early stuff and we'd seen some designs, and I have to say the Russell T. Davis and Ed Thomas, the designer, were fantastic. They gave us access to a huge number of stuff that was going to become iconic. You know, the Slovene and the other characters. This was back in the day when we had to do everything sculpted wise was done by hand, or not by hand, but it was done by sculptors who used wax or some other similar clay to sculpt it in. So it was a slightly longer process and a little bit more subjective than it is now, where you just go and scan somebody and then they go, I don't like it. And you go, but it's you. You can't argue about it. And they go, yeah, but I can't argue about it. I want this changed or whatever. So yeah, that you know, we've had that happen on a few licenses where, but it was much more subjective back then. You know, you have to kind of, and the process always is you when you're dealing with characters. But everybody was invested in getting it right. You know, everybody was invested in getting it right. Everybody cared. So there was nobody pushing back. There was nobody trying to be unhelpful. The retailers were fantastic. They were always desperate. They were desperate for the product. They saw it all at the toy fair. You know, and we were showing them things in a little cabinet at toy fair, and everybody bought into it. It was great. It was absolutely fantastic.
The classic figures, obviously, they came, that was about 2008, I think they finally got released. How did that come about? Obviously, you were riding the wave of Russell T Davies. Yeah,
I mean, that was really it. I mean, Doctor Who was just really big. There was already some interest in some of the previous Doctors. We begun a relationship with what was back then Underground Toys, and I think we'd done a couple of exclusives, and it really started with the Doctors because we kind of ended up building that line of Doctors up, and then that naturally sort of then evolved into waves of other characters that we could potentially create and bring into being. So that's really where it came from. And absolutely, it came off I mean, without the strength of the main line and the sort of series 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they just wouldn't have happened. But there was demand for Doctor Who, and it's like anything. It's like new Star Trek resurrects interest in old Star Trek. So, and people, and it works kind of both ways. So, and I quite like that, the fact that there's probably people watching classic Doctor Who now because they like contemporary Doctor Who, and there's also on the flip side that some of the people that are, well, we're all old geezers, but the people that are started off watching classic are now watching new Who. So it's healthy and it's good, but they quite often are germinated by whatever's currently happening, and it just works backwards.
And what was the initial thinking with that first wave of figures? Like, what were the processes in picking those initial action figures for the first classic wave?
Purely and simply, they were my favorites. I mean, I've always been blatantly honest about this. That whole wave one of classic was purely and simply because I basically went, I want a Vok robot, I want Magnus Grill, I want Mr. Sin, I want the giant robot, I want the Sea Devil. It was just my first top 6 that I like. I'm totally blatant about it. But that was completely where it came from. It was just my favorites, and then that just kind of spiraled into doing other ones. It's always quite interesting to hear what other people would have chosen as well, because obviously depending on the era that you got into Doctor Who, you have your other ones.
That's a pretty good wave, though, isn't it? That's a pretty strong wave. I remember when it was announced, because I think it was announced on one of the early Doctor Who forums before the pictures were released. I think you made a post saying we're doing classic Doctor Who and this will be the first wave. And I remember, however old I would have been then, like 14 or something.
Yeah.
I watched Robots of Death. I think it must have been about 10 times back to back, so that I could note down every single Vok robot number in that series, and they were all on the decal sheet.
Yeah, of course, because they came with the extra stickers, didn't they?
Which was just insane if you think about it. It's like you just go, V1 and V2 and V3, and but it wasn't, because as we know, they were all populated by different ones. So and we got 3 versions out of that Vok robot. But I absolutely loved that. I've still got a lot of those.
The other thing I think that's worth mentioning, Matt, is a lot of this may sound self-congratulatory, and it's definitely not intended that way. We make toys, pure and simple. We didn't come up with the original concepts, ideas, or creatures. We get a huge amount of help from the BBC and other parties when we develop these toys. But we're riding on the coattails of giants to a huge degree, in the sense that, all those original stories, those original designs, the special effects guys, the creature effects guys, and, be that classic or contemporary Who, they're the guys that came up with these fantastic, memorable monsters. So I think it's super important that you bear that in mind. And, like I say, we just make toys and we couldn't do it without them.
Well, we've been inundated with questions, Al, that we're going to run through with you now. You can tell us as much or as little as you like. We should just
Is that a good thing? Were you holding your script down with Agador?
We were, yes, of course we were. Bernard.
That's an outrageous use of a royal beast of Peladon.
Well, let's just get these 2 out of the way. Are we going to see a fugitive Doctor figure?
Not on the cards currently, but never say never.
That'll do for me. Excellent. Cool. We'll get that one's out of the way now.
Put it this way, I would love if there was, because I thought Joe Martin was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So yes, that would be, if I had a wish list, I do have a wish list, but if I had a wish list, that would definitely be a figure I'd want.
Can you divulge your wish list? Because I know a few people have asked, like, what would be your most wanted figure? But is that going to give the game away as to what's not coming out?
It might give some of the game away. I've got a lot of figures that I like. I mean, the situation. I mean, it's I think what people don't understand is just how, and I can't give you the exact figures, and I wouldn't want to, but just how extraordinarily expensive these figures are to make. I think there's a conception out there that because we tweak things for B&M and we can put a new head and new paint ops and stuff, it's that's small beans. That isn't small beans, and doing a full figure of any new character is 100% not small beans. The world's got, and then on top of that, the world's got more expensive anyway. So, you're talking big money for these things. So I'm always one that sort of says never say never, and I've always got my little wish list hanging on the wall. Joe Martin, the Fugitive Doctor, would certainly be up there. I would love to do a Cyberman, one of the slightly more recent ones. I'm not sure which one I'd pick, if I'm honest. I think I'd be tempted to go for the more recent one.
Yeah.
Just because I kind of felt the post-Cybus ones were a little bit War Machine.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a bit unkind. But there was something about the latest ones that kind of harked back to the original Cybermen. And I've always been of the opinion that if you make the Cybermen too robotic, you lose the whole point of them, which is they're utterly horrifying. They should be, they're basically animated cadavers with machines grafted on. That was always the terrifying thing. That's why it's such a, when Star Trek nicked them and basically turned them into the Borg, that was the biggest outrage ever. But to me, the Cybermen are more horrifying because you can see they were human. The original masks and stuff are much more scary. You guys know, I'm sure I've talked to you about it, but one of my favorite Doctor Who stories is the Big Finish spare parts audio story. I don't think there's a finer Cyberman origin story out there. It's just doom laden from start to finish, but it's just a fantastic story. The atmosphere is just, grim, to put it mildly. So I think Sacha Dhawan, Master, definitely. I know people say, "Oh, you could do him cheaply, and you could do." It's not quite, and it's a bit like the Anthony Ainley Master, which we'll come on to in a minute. These characters are so important. For me, you can't change the head or give it a new arm. If you're going to do it properly. It's not a kind of. I personally can't do that and just go, I'll take this figure and I'll stick a head on it, and that's the Anthony Ainley Master with a little rough Victorian collar. For me, it would, if you took something like, which I have looked at, is characters like the Hemivores. They're a kind of a mishmash of body parts, and I think you could get away with not being too artistically on target as far as their exact costumes, because with the decoration and stuff you can do a lot, and I think you could get away with a lot, and I have looked at it. But with primary characters like the Master and the Cybermen and the Ainley Master especially, I'm very much of the opinion, if I can ever do it and do it properly, I'll do it. Until then, don't keep telling me I can change somebody's head, because I'm not going to listen to you.
So now we're going to pose your questions to Al, starting with Bulkhead Studios, who asks, what are your thoughts on the 3.75-inch line, and was it ever thought that this would possibly replace the 5-inch figures altogether?
What are my thoughts on the 3.5? I really liked them. I thought they gave us one massive opportunity that didn't really come to pass, which was a bit unfortunate, which was by changing the scale, it suddenly gave us the opportunity to do vehicles and play sets. And I really thought it would potentially be a bit of a game changer. I love the idea that you would have your Peter Capaldi figure running out the TARDIS and running up the ramp of the Millennium Falcon, because it just happened to be in the same scale as the Star Wars figures, or jumping into a snow speeder, or we could suddenly make Bessie, we could make console rooms, etc., etc. My thoughts on are dead simple. I like them. Do I like them as much as the 5-inch figures? No, if I'm brutally honest, but I thought they served a purpose. It was at a time when the Doctor Who figure line, and figure lines in general, so it's not just the Doctor Who figure line, I might say, action figures in general were sort of on the slide. I thought it might give us an opportunity. It did. We were slightly unfortunate. It was a case where there was just, I think, a misunderstanding of how it was supposed to work. I don't think in the long run it would have changed much, if I'm brutally honest. I think just at that point in time, action figures per se were just, the boys' action figure line was just disappearing rapidly. The flip side of that is, what it did mean, I think, was that the 5-inch figure range for the collectors, it probably felt like the love was instantly booted out the door, and that somehow we didn't care anymore. We did. It was just, it's a business, and we're in it to make money. But it's as simple as that. We don't do the Doctor Who line for just because we like it, and we can't. That's not how you run a business. So it was an experiment. I don't think some of the things I thought would come to pass would inevitably, such as the play sets, because we almost immediately started doing these slightly more budget oriented cardboard play sets. And I think for me, as well as everyone else, that was a bit disappointing. So, so I love it. I thought it was good. I've still got a bunch of them in my drawer here. Yeah, it was good. I liked it. It was worth doing. And it still holds a little dear place in my heart. Not quite as dear a place as my 5-inch figures do, but there you go.
James Johnson asks, "Hi Al, thank you for all of the Daleks over the years. It's happily kept my bank balance drained. Are there any plans for more comic and big finish ones in the future?"
Did you say that was from Dwayne Johnson or from...
Almost as cool.
Yeah, Daleks do. Well, Daleks are expensive. They're much more expensive than the standard figures. Again, it's something people maybe don't realize, because I think they just assume, oh, it's a Dalek, you can make it, it's cheap, but they're not. They're more expensive than the figures. So I understand the pain of the cash drain for sure. Again, I would say it's an opportunity thing. The big finish guys were exceptionally helpful when we went and sort of said, would you mind if we did a sort of cooperative release, and we used some of, as a courtesy. In reality, we could have gone to the BBC and just said, can we use that? And they would have probably said yes, but the big finish guys are absolutely brilliant, and I wouldn't have wanted to do that. So it was an opportunity. We had the discussion with them. The reality was there wasn't a huge amount financially in it for them. So I would say very graciously, they jumped on board, and it was done more as a sort of cross-promotional opportunity, which I think it did really well. It's interesting people are asking that, because at the time I certainly remember a lot of kickback on that, saying, oh, why are we doing big finish stories when there's so much other stuff that could be mined? But the big finish guys, I can never praise them highly enough. I absolutely love their stuff. I think they just do astounding stuff, and I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. They're brilliant. So the answer is I'd love to, but it's probably a case of picking the right thing and the right opportunity, and being realistic about what you can do. So they've got really funky, cool Daleks, like Dalek time controllers with extra bits on, and we can't do that. So it's there's some characters in Big Finish that I absolutely think are brilliant. I love Livchenko. I think Nicola Walker is astounding. I love the Dark Eyes series. I think the Ravenous are just a terrific villain. The 11 is just Mark Bonner as the 11. I think that guy deserves an Oscar. There's so many. If whoever is listening, if you haven't listened to the Big Finish stuff, go and listen to it. It's brilliant. But yeah, I mean, it's just a case of if there was a opportunity, I would jump on it. But I think if we suddenly came out with a bunch of big finished product and characters, and the people that still wanted Susan because I'm a completist, suddenly will be turned on. Like a pack of pitchfork wielding collectors at the door going, "Why have you done this? You haven't done Tegan." So yeah, there's an opportunity, and I would love to. It's more a case of as and when, and if we can do it, and if we can, I would love to. It's a very long way. I've got to stop doing long-winded answers. Next question, please.
Next question comes from Dan, who's asked, what has been your favourite B&M set so far and why?
My favourite B&M set's the one that you guys haven't seen yet.
There we go.
It's one of the ones from this year. This year's B&M offering has been a little bit different, a little bit more grounded in reality in terms of what we were able to do and achieve. But there is one item that's actually, that's not true. I'm lying through my teeth. My favorite B&M set by a complete mile is the robot set that we just did, because I got to go back and tweak the robot, which I've been wanting to do for ages. But yeah, that one is good. And there's one I'm looking at for next year, which, if I can get that one away, fingers crossed, yeah, it'll be good. I'm always excited about the next one. It's weird when you've worked. I mean, you guys will get this. When you work on something, people are like, "Oh, you work on Doctor Who," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it's my job." It's like, by the time you've looked at it 20 million times and signed it off and seen 6 of them across your desk, you're just looking to the next one, really. So I'm always excited for the one that's coming up, because that's when I get to be creative. So I tend to get less excited by the stuff that's been there and out and gone already. Yeah, for sure. But I would say the robot set, I think, is one of my personal favorites, albeit it's in too small a box, which was I did this amazing insert for that product, and it got smaller and smaller and smaller. I had to keep cropping my artwork down. And then one of the first reviews said, "Oh, it's just in a box with a crappy bit of wall." And I was like, it didn't used to have a crappy bit of wall. It was a really lovely wall until it got cut down.
Michael Markey asks, any plans for History of the Cybermen sets in the future?
The honest answer is yes. I mean, probably. I think with the likes of B&M, you start to, like, I almost feel we've run into a wall with Doctor and Tardis sets. I mean, I don't know what anyone else's shelves are like, and I could probably pan up and show you one up there. But I think we're sort of groaning under TARDISes. So I think at some point we'll probably have to look at those. The danger with the Cybermen is, again, there are some missing from the lineup. So it would be a potted history of the Cybermen, which might not be quite as well received and we've released a lot of Cybermen through B&M already, and it would be just another figure pack, whereas there's always been a differentiation in the sense of there's always been a TARDIS set, the 3-figure sets, the Dalek sets have always been slightly different. So the answer is yes, but I think if that's a veiled way of somebody saying, what are the chances we're going to get a Peter Capaldi Mondasian Cyberman and a Wheel in Space Cyberman and a servo robot? And the answer is no, you won't. Not currently. Not on the cards.
Jack D. Evans asks, what's the story with the 3.75-inch Invasion of Earth figures from the Toys R Us Dalek Collector's set? Were there plans to make more new series Dalek figures in classic colours?
That was just my slightly mad idea. They came almost before. I can't even remember how that happened, but the Daleks came way before the other 3.75-inch figures did. And we almost had a Dalek range on its own of individual carded Daleks and little Daleks that buzzed along. And then we had these ones. And it was, I mean, I just think there's I'm just a fan of doing a bit of a mashup between the 60s colored Daleks and the modern look, because the modern styling new series Dalek is just so lovely, and it kind of lends itself to being slightly different colors. So yeah, I was just happy to muck around and create variants. So we got a few of those, and they were in that sort of slight. We were doing some quite funky packaging. It's a bit like a yogurt pot upside down and stuff. I did have some in the office. I would have been going, oh, look, here's an example. But actually, I think I took it home and stuck it on the loft. So it's somewhere there.
Robert James Billingham asks, what is your personal favourite figure in the line?
I'm not sure I have one, but if I did, it's probably this guy.
For audio listeners, Al is holding up the Fourth Doctor from Pyramids of Mars.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mars, Fourth Doctor, of course. I've got a few things. So the War Doctor, I think, is one of the best figures we ever did. I mean, I think that figure is stunning. Holds its own against anything. You can throw whatever you like at that, but that figure is great. The although we only ever got one variant of it, the Clara figure I wanted to do so that she didn't look clunky with gammy hip joints and stuff. So we did her in that sort of TPR, slightly rubbery material red dress, but I still think that's one of the nicest figures that we ever did. Most of the Cybermen figures are pretty good as well. It's just sometimes you just get a figure that will come out, and as I say, you just have an expectation it's going to be great, and sometimes it just, for whatever reason, it just doesn't quite work. There's this thing when you're making figures where when they cut the steel, and I've had this happen a few times, it's really sharp. You get the first shots and you go, oh my God, that's amazing. It's brilliant. You know, it's so pleasing. It's lovely. And then what happens is they polish the tool. So some guy goes, and you can get people that are a little bit ambitious with the polishing, and somehow they manage to buff off a shed load of the detail. And then you can just get weird things like the way they mold stuff, because when they injection mold the PVC parts, I don't know if you guys know about this, but basically the two sides of the big steel mold, which is roasting hot, boom, come together. The plastic is injected into it. Water is then cycled through the like a car engine to cool it down. Water is then cycled through the tooling. The tool opens and the little plastic part drops 3 feet and usually into a big bucket of water with 200,000 other little heads or components, whatever you're making. Some figures just distort horribly.
Miles Taylor asks, are there any figures that we'll never see re-released, whether that's due to molds being destroyed, licensing issues, exclusivity deals, etc.?
No, there's nothing to do with exclusivity deals, but there are figures that won't be re-released, and I'm a bit bloody minded about it. But if the character option exclusives are a good example of that. They are exclusive because we're only doing them once. We're not, if you're hanging around to get a fur coat Troughton, 3 years down the line in B&M, it's not going to happen. It's just, for me, the whole point of those sets was they were supposed to be a bit more premium, a bit better, better decoration, nicer packaging, etc. So I'm never say never about most of the figures we've done, but there's some that I think if we released a destroyed Cassandra, we'd be lynched.
Have you been looking at my questions? That's the next question.
That's the next one, Matt.
I don't think destroyed Cassandra's ever. Oh, speaking of which, she was kicking around here.
What's the story behind that, Al? Tell us.
Why? Ben Egan asked that next. He said, "Destroyed Cassandra. Why?"
Destroyed Cassandra came. I think this has been wildly talked about on the forums, but I think it's probably very near the truth. But I think at the time it was a case that Doctor Who action figures. I mean, we were selling them to everyone. We were selling them to Argos. Woolworths was massive at the time. We had Toys R Us. All the shop retail, all the sort of groceries were taking them as well. And we were trying to do variants and exclusives for so many people that I think Destroyed Cassandra came. Well, there's two options on this. One, it was just so wildly successful as a line that we didn't stop to think how freaking stupid it was, which is possible. Or two, it was a way of reusing some of the tooling to make an action figure who was dead and basically a scene filler. So she's up there with Grandma Connolly. I mean, at least Grandma Connolly wasn't quite dead and potentially offered the chance of resurrection. But yeah, Destroyed Cassandra.
Figure. I love that Grandma Connolly figure. She's great.
I love Grandma Connolly. I still, to this day, every time we get, I'm looking at what can I do for B&M, I still occasionally look at Grandma Connolly and think, yeah, got to be a way to get,
even
a way to get poor old Mrs. Connolly in there somewhere. Yeah, so that's the story behind Destroyed Cassandra. I think it was literally a case we needed a figure. I think it's more likely we just didn't stop to think how bloody stupid it was in reality.
Max Farr asks, the factory is burning down and you can only save 3 molds. Which would they be?
Teletubbies, the Clangers, and probably Danger Mouse. No, I'm joking. Not Danger Mouse. Rasta Mouse. Well, I would throw that back in your face. That's in the sense that if the factory can burn down, the tools will be perfectly fine. Thank you very much. We'll pick them out of the burning rubble and we'll have it up and running again in no time. The classic Dalek. That's what I'd save. I'd save everything from the classic Dalek. That's that one figure with multiple different bits that have been done and tooled for it over the years, but it is. And for those listening at home, I'm holding up a Dalek. Oh, actually, that's a bit of a giveaway.
I was just about to say, I don't think we've seen that one yet.
Yeah, the classic Dalek would be saved 100%, along with the factory cat.
Oh, bless him. James Patterson asks, any chance of more Tardis playsets? The last one was the 11th Doctor's Tardis in 2010.
Again, if it's a veiled inquiry as to will we ever get a classic TARDIS playset, I think the honest answer is probably no. I don't know in regards to going forwards. I would love to. I mean, I think that the TARDIS playset that we did do, actually both of them, 3 if you count the junkyard one, but both of them, I would say, especially the first one, were absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely,
it's still one of the most complex things I've ever done and put together. I remember taking it in to the BBC and putting it on the BBC executive that we were dealing with at the time's desk and going, look at this. And she turned around and went, can it be bigger? So I went, no. It's freaking gigantic, and that's as big as we can make it. I think that was good. If there was the opportunity, 100%, definitely.
Dippin' Sticks asks, what has been the longest or most difficult figure or set to get from idea to release in the range?
One I can't tell you about because I'm still trying to get it sorted. The most difficult figure, it's the Ainley Master. No, it's not. Just you imagine how many people have now just gone, what did he say?
We'll just clip that bit out, Al. We won't get your clarification in there.
None of them are particularly difficult. We did have one disaster with the 3.75 inch range, which was the first Peter Capaldi figure. The eagle-eyed amongst you will remember that there was an image released of Peter Capaldi in his lovely red jacket with the front flipped open, and it looked lovely. But somehow, with that figure, everything everything went wrong. The scan that we took wasn't flattering at all. I think it was the pose. It had a slightly bent-legged pose. He was kind of in a pose. And when it got broken down into, and as it just sort of went along, it just became this really strange thing. I think, the head was too small. The jacket had this weird thing of curling outwards. The thighs were massively thick, but then the bottom calves were sort of really, I'm painting a beautiful picture here, I understand, and it was just one of those things where it didn't seem to matter what we did, and we tried I tried a lot of stuff, but I remember putting it in as a pre-production sample for approval, and knowing before I'd even pressed the send button that there wasn't a hope in hell we were going to get that figure approved. And sure enough, there was a deathly silence. And then I think about 24 hours later, they sort of came back and went, we're not approving that. And I went, well, that's no surprise. But yeah, that was the worst. That was the worst experience. That figure was, and there's 3 in existence, and I have all 3 of them. So and they're never seeing the light of day. But yeah, it just went wrong. Everything on that figure went wrong. But the next one was fabulous.
Scotty Lodinson asks, why no celery on the original 5th Doctor?
Oh, Celerygate. Pure stupidity is the honest answer. I don't even know why I did it, to be honest. I'd read an interview, or I'd seen something where Peter Davidson said he hated that bloody celery, and I sort of said, "Oh, so did I." So let's not put it on there. And I still to this day don't know why. And I got bollocked quite rightly by several people, but it was just an incredibly stupid thing to do, to just decide that somehow something as iconic as a celery shouldn't be on there. So I got my butt kicked. And yeah, to my eternal shame, Celerygate is brought up several, and that celery has served me well, because it's been used on a bucket of stuff since. But yes, it was pure. What's the word? Is it avarice? Is that, no, not avarice? It's pure. Whatever it was, I was just a complete arse. I think. Quote Bill Potts, I was a complete bloody arse. Yeah, it was just a dumb thing to do, and made no sense at all. So yes, that's the reason. That's the reason there was no celery, because the idiot that was in charge of that figure decided, for whatever reason, not to include it.
Jack WC asks, back when image backdrops were used in the box sets, how did you choose which screen captures, individual elements, Easter eggs to include in the layout?
Oh, well, I did all those myself. So actually, it's purely down to kind of me trying to bodge them together. And that's a good example, actually, of where sometimes things that you think are going to be simple turn out to be really complex. Like Caves of Androzani set was an absolute nightmare to do. And yet something like Day of the Daleks was easy, because it was just kind of like, find a canal, find a bridge, find some foliage. But some literally take ages, because you kind of got to kind of Photoshop them all together, and then some are really quick, and it's quite easy. It's and as before, it's always the stuff that you think is going to be easy that's difficult, and vice versa. So yeah, and then as to the Easter eggs, that's usually down to me, and just if I'm deciding I've got the time and inclination to put something in there. So like Professor Chronotis's library, with him being a Time Lord, it just seemed like an opportunity to kind of chuck stuff in that a Time Lord might have collected as he was going, including things like teleport bracelets and Aurak and the Moment and other stuff that was sort of hidden on those shelves. Sometimes it's not that easy, and it doesn't work particularly well. I put some really cool ones in the Abominable Snowman that just happened to be right behind where the blister was attached, because they didn't tell me they were going to be blistering it. So I did all that lovely insert thinking it was going to be the usual sort of tied in plastic blister, and then they actually heat sealed it on. So when you removed that, it completely wrecked the backdrop. So yeah, so sometimes you do your best and and it doesn't work.
James asks, what is Al's opinion on toy customizers? Does he love them and their creativity with his range, or are they the bane of his existence?
This isn't Captain Jimmy Pie, is it?
I'm not sure it is. No.
No, because he's good. He does a lot of really cool custom. Hell, if you want to customize stuff, go ahead and customize it. Just don't try and sell it as a basically to make a money in a reproduction piece of packaging. That's just taking the mick, frankly. But if you want to customize stuff for yourself, yeah, all for it. I mean, who doesn't customize their figures? You know, it might be just adding a bit of well, you know, Matt, I bought a C-3PO the other day, and it was kind of like, you know, I was sitting there looking at it, was like, that's rubbish, it looks too shiny, so just get the old wax out and sort of so yeah, I mean, I think everyone, why not? No issue. And some of the customs that people do are amazing. And there's also the infinite monkey cage scenario, which happened on the Romana Destiny of the Daleks figure, where I was already literally working on that figure, and then somebody in the office came up and went, "Oh, look what this guy's customed," and I was like, "Oh shit!" Because it was exactly the same. It was exactly the same body, exactly the same figure, exactly the same paint job. Just almost like he kind of lifted it. But then it's, like I say, infinite monkey cage. You will eventually arrive at the same conclusion. So yeah, some of the customs are absolutely stunning, and some of the stuff that people do just scratch built. I mean, I've seen a couple of Emperor Daleks that just look amazing, really good.
You mentioned there about C-3PO. One of the questions that we didn't put on the list, but someone did ask, are you a toy collector or figure collector yourself? And if so, what lines do you collect?
I'm not. I'm more of a prop collector, if I'm honest. I do have some toys, but I'm quite limited in what I collect. I've got maybe 6 Black Series figures, but that's just because they're ones that I particularly like. I've got some Doctor Who, very limited Doctor Who ones. I've got some handmade TARDISes. Some were built by me. But I like props. I mean, I love Indiana Jones. One of my favorite movies ever is Blade Runner. Star Wars mostly can do no wrong, although there has been some real rubbish stuff. But yeah, it usually tends to be props, lightsabers, guns, whips, bags, jackets. That I like props probably more than I do figures. So don't crucify me for that. It's just happens to be a fact. Even James Bond, that kind of stuff. I've got a lovely little.
Oh wow! Look at that.
Nice, lovely
James Bond, which I lost some of the bits for. I've been steadily trying to remake it in 3D, but yeah, that. So some toys, yes, I've got a few Eagle transporters hidden around. But my wife is not very understanding with when it comes to things like toys and stuff lying around. So most of it's hidden away.
This is the last question now. This is from DW Figure Photos on Twitter, and they asked, back when you got the toy license for Doctor Who, did you ever imagine the figure line would become as big as it is today?
No, obviously, no, I don't think we did. I mean, I think it's very much worth saying the part of the success of the figure line has been the sculpting, and I am not responsible for the sculpting. There was a hugely talented pool of people that were involved in those figures in the beginning. I still work with Ed Barnett Ward from the Affable Company, who does most of my Doctor Who sculpts these days. He and I are very much on the same wavelength. So if I don't like something or vice versa, we just tend to work and very well together. And we have done right from about 20 years ago. But these guys are really the mainstay of the figure line, and they have been. So it's for me, I think it's important to give a shout out to them because they've been so instrumental in just in keeping the line going. It's also worth saying, and again, I don't think people realize Doctor Who's. It's now we've added variants and stuff, but I think we had plus 300 individual figures and plus 400, well over 400 combined or hybrid figures, which is second only to the Star Wars license under Hasbro. I mean, the Doctor Who figure line is humongous. It really is. So the answer to that question is no. We're absolutely no idea. Here we are 17 years later, and it's been a roller coaster. Sometimes we're things are flying out the door, and sometimes they're a bit quieter. But that line has remained very popular and very steady, and everyone here cares about it. I mean, we do get the odd cock up, I admit. Hands up, things go wrong. Things like the back of Daleks don't get painted, but it's not because we wanted it to be wrong. It's because the factory's done it that way. But yeah, everybody cares. Everybody puts more, in some cases, more than we probably should. But we all absolutely 100% care. We love Doctor Who. We love the toys. We love the action figures. I'm very grateful to all the support that we've had as well, because the collectors always stay with us despite the odd cock up. And it's genuinely nice to be able to surprise people with something new or different or something they just weren't expecting. So it's very rewarding, from Disco Dancing Rose and the Ninth, as I think they've now become termed. And that's the weird thing, we were doing radio controlled Daleks, and we just said we need to do a couple of action figures, and they were going to be static. They were just going to be, which is why they're in that pose, because they were just going to be, and they literally match up. If you put them in their poses, they literally match up to the photography that they did for the sort of press releases and stuff at the time. So it's not that we just went, oh, let's put them in some gammy poses. That was the pose they were put in, and they weren't even supposed to be articulated. And then we were like, oh, we should articulate them, and then we got those figures out, and then we had the 10th Doctor came in. So we had a regeneration set, so that was done as well, and then it kind of just snowballed.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Al. That was amazing.
Thank you. It's been a delight to chat about these things. Some of them seem long ago, and some of them seem relatively fresh. Thank everybody for their questions as well. It's always good to. I'm sorry if I couldn't answer everything. Some things I'm not allowed to talk about. Some things are a bit contentious, but yeah, thank you. I've enjoyed it. I'm hoping to see you guys at some point, sometime soon. Or
yeah,
definitely. Yeah. We'll have to arrange that. We'll have to sort that out. That'd be fabulous. Maybe get you in the studio.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be good. I'd love that.
Wonderful.
Amazing.
Well, thank you, Al. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for sending your questions, as Al said. And we'll see you next time with whatever we've got planned.
Yeah.
See you later.
Bye-bye.